Welcome to the Elevating La Cultura podcast, a space where I talk with Latinas who are passionate about what they do and are willing to share that passion with others to change the narrative, especially for the next generation. Each season is centered around different topics, but all with a Latina perspective. Welcome to Season 10, where I'm talking with Latinas who have founded nonprofits. I'm so excited to share these powerful conversations. So vámonos, and let's get into it. Tabitha Nieto is the Executive Director of the COR Community Foundation. She has been a certified hypnotherapist for over 10 years, a women's coach, and an experienced facilitator for women. She is trauma trained, having spent hundreds of hours studying complex and developmental trauma, advanced leadership development, and group facilitation courses. She is an experienced workshop facilitator trained to support others through deep emotional explorations. She has also worked alongside hundreds of women and participated in, facilitated, or produced dozens of in-person and online events through various corporations, COR Community Foundation, and her own business. She combines all of her healing modalities to support her clients in reclaiming their power and living more fully using her slow care framework. Previously, Tabitha held a successful six-figure corporate America career inside a sprawling, male-dominated Fortune 500 organization. She left this during the pandemic to explore a deeper connection to her life, heart, and body, heal her past, and share her journey with women who want the same. Tabitha is of mixed race and proudly identifies with her Colombian and Latina roots. She also acknowledges the racism and white supremacy that have shaped our country and is committed to continuing her work and raising her voice. Let's get into this episode. Hi, I'm excited about my next guest because I always like to meet new people, and we recently met at the We All Grow Summit, the one-day summit, the Amigas in Business in Los Angeles, and it was at the end of the evening, and I'm so thankful that I sat down with my friends next to you and we got to chatting because now I can have you on the podcast. So thank you so much for agreeing to come on and chat with me, and I'll let you introduce yourself.
Oh, thank you, Karina. It was really great meeting you. So serendipitous. I sat down at that spot because I was waiting to talk to my business coach who I'd never met in person, and she was talking to somebody else, and we just started chatting. So it was really, really great. My name is Tabitha Nieto, and I am the executive director of a nonprofit, COR Community Foundation, but we go by CCF. I'm also a women's coach. I'm a hypnotherapist and a trauma-informed professional. And so really the work that I do in the world and how I make money is supporting women in opening their hearts and reclaiming the life that they've always wanted and being with them in whatever it is that they need to access within themselves to get there. So I'm really lucky. I'm in a space where I get to work with women, whether it's at the nonprofit or within my own business.
I want to chat with you about everything you just said because it is so interesting and unique, and I just have so many questions. But I want to start at the beginning.
Okay.
And what brought you to do what you're doing now and the field that you're in?
Oh gosh. I mean, life, life experiences. I think that's the case for a lot of us that are in this profession. And many times the people that are in this profession is because they've had a hard time in life potentially. And that is the case for me. So really a lot of my own trials and tribulations and experiencing just as a kid, I was born in Los Angeles, and besides a couple years that I was in Northern California and then a year in Colombia, I lived in Los Angeles my whole life. And my parents were really young when they had me. My mom was 16. And from what Ancestry.com tells me, her lineage is Scottish. And then my dad was a 20-year-old Colombian immigrant. So my parents were really young. They had a lot of battles to face within themselves and within each other. They divorced quite early, and I ended up moving to Northern California with my mom for a few years, and those were really hard years in my life. And there was abuse, there was sexual abuse, there was neglect, there was quite a bit that was happening in my little world. And the only thing I wanted was to be rescued. Like, I really wanted to be rescued, and I was. My dad came and got me when I was 9 years old. And the reason why he had to come get me is because my mom had been incarcerated for drugs. And so here I came from, I went from living in this very white town in Northern California where I actually did look different, and experienced just terrible things from like the folks there, as far as like calling me names that I didn't even know what they meant. And then coming to Los Angeles and being like dropped in with my Colombian family that some didn't speak English. Fortunately, I did speak English, I did speak Spanish, but when I came back to live with them, I was refusing to speak Spanish. And so that whole experience began with my family coming back to Los Angeles and me really living in this Colombian culture with my Colombian family, who didn't have a lot of access to understand American culture or to understand that I was mixed. And so that was really painful in my home, to feel like I wasn't seen, or that I was even like diminished because I was half white, and I couldn't embrace that. I couldn't like accept that I was this other half of something. And so I ended up moving to Colombia for a year, which was like, I hope in life we all have the opportunity to have these life-changing moments, that we can actually have the awareness that certain aspects are like life-changing moments. And living in Colombia for a year from 11 to 12 was a life-changing moment. And, I wish I could say that when I came back to Los Angeles to live with my family, that everything was good, but there were a lot of challenges there. Living in families where American culture isn't maybe celebrated or totally embraced, and there's this like, let's just stay together and just do things the way that we do them in Colombia, can be a little disorienting for us growing up in that environment. Um, so I really struggled in like, where do I belong? I struggled in making friends. Who do I hang out with? And I went to a lot of schools. I went to 10 schools from kindergarten all the way through high school, 10 different schools, 10 different opportunities to be in a new environment where I felt like I didn't belong. And so I had this big story about like, I don't belong. I don't belong. I don't know where I fit in. People don't like me. But I was very resilient, and I was very independent, and I was in a pretty tough living environment. So I moved out when I was 18, 19. I had no idea what I was doing, but I just knew that like there was something else for me. Um, yeah, and I saw my first therapist when I was about 19, 20 years old, and I had no idea how to share like vulnerably and like what to say to a person. And like, I think a lot of us, Walter Mercado was like, I think, my first therapist, and like taught me about like personal development. So I kind of knew like, oh, there is something magical out there. There is something bigger. So I remember signing up to see a therapist. I saw her a few times, but then I was so scared to actually tell her what was actually painful for me. And so I remember calling her one day and telling her over the phone, I want to tell you this before I come in person. And it's that I've been, sexually abused by two different men. And then I never went back to see her again. And so, even with all of that, I think I always knew I wanted to help people. And so, um, my first thought was I wanted to be a veterinarian, and then I was like, maybe I'll be a social worker. But the truth is school was not my jam. I had a really hard time in school. It makes sense why I did. And so I just had to get out in the world and start making money. And fortunately, because I had a passion for helping people, the first few jobs that I had in my 20s was working for nonprofits. And it was definitely my way of giving back to the world and being just in that place of like heart centered mission. Like I really liked the mission behind these nonprofits. But when you're living on your own and you have nobody to count on to pay your bills, and nonprofits are usually around because they have good funding, grants, or donations. So I kept getting laid off because there wasn't enough of those things. And so I decided to move to corporate America. And I worked in corporate America for 16 years until 2020, which for a lot of people, life shifted with the pandemic, and it was really hard for many people. But for me, it was a big blessing to be laid off. And while I was at that organization, while I was incredibly unhappy and not like totally fulfilled, making lots of money, but not fulfilled, it was a male dominated industry. And I was able to get to the top there. And the good part about it was that while I was there, I started therapy again, and then was like, again, like, nope, I'm out of here. This is not for me. And then I met a hypnotherapist. I was like, what is this hypnotherapy thing? And I went and I had a session with her, and I started working with her one on one. And that's when things in my life, that was another, that was a moment, another moment, life changing moment where I learned that all the struggle, everything I was facing, all the thoughts I had inside, all the feelings I was running from, like that it wasn't my fault. And working with her just then opened up a huge path for me where I decided I wanted to do the same thing for folks. So I went to a college here in Los Angeles for a 1 year program to become a hypnotherapist. Then I went to coaching school. Then I went to a leadership program, to facilitation programs. Spent a lot of money. Like the corporate America helped me pay all of this in cash. And then I went to, so I just continued the growing there. And then sometime in 2021 is where I landed at another nonprofit, which kind of is, and then that has like taken on its own like path there as well.
Wow, thank you for sharing. I really appreciate you sharing vulnerably and sharing uh, just all of the ups and downs of like looking for help. I think there's a lot of people that can relate to wanting to see a therapist, to do therapy, but there's always this hesitation of like, but I don't know how, because we were never taught to share. We were never taught to express our feelings. We were never taught how to process big life changing events, trauma. Like, it's just so strange for us to think that it's okay to be in this position. And so I'm sure there are other people that can relate to the story that you shared with your therapy journey. I'm curious on what is hypnotherapy. I think we have heard it, we have, or at least I have heard about it, but I've never actually like sat down to think about what it is and the process that one goes through when going into a session. So I'd love to learn more.
Yeah, that's such a thank you for asking, because anytime I have a first session with somebody um doing hypnotherapy, it is about demystifying it. And it's like, it's not like the movie Get Out. It's not like a lot of these shows that we've seen. There's like hypnosis in it. And people have these perspectives. And one of the things that I like saying is like, if I could control your mind, I would be making way more money if I could control people's minds, but it's not. So just, it's not mind control at all. Hypnotherapy is actually, it's a therapeutic modality that is used to help a person understand why they are currently facing some sort of a dilemma or a bind or an obstacle. So it's like, what is it that happened on a subconscious level? So essentially, all the experiences that we had from the time that we were born until about 9 years old are is like, that's the blueprint we have inside of us that's always there. And even though we logically know we want to move a certain direction in life, we have the wisdom to do it. We have the willpower. Eventually, a lot of times when people are trying to do it's kind of like, if you kind of like think about something that you've been wanting to do in your life. Maybe it's around exercise, or it's around a project or whatnot, and you're like, échale ganas, and you're like really into it, right? You make the list, you tell your friends why you're going to do it, and then you do it for about a week, maybe two, and then you fall off. And so hypnotherapy is really helping a person understand, why is that happening? What belief do you have that maybe is getting in the way? What story do you have that might be in the way? So it's really looking at these experiences that we had as kids. And for me, the power of it is that this is really, yes, we can have take self responsibility for the way that we're acting in life right now. But it's having this awareness that, like, oh, it's not your fault, maybe, that you feel like you can't ask for help and you need to protect yourself all the time. It's because of this thing that happened. It's not your fault that, when people are telling you, you can make $200,000, that you don't believe it because of where you came from. And so the setting of this in hypnotherapy is like, we talk, and then there's a portion towards the end where I lead my clients through this beautiful visualization where they get to feel the thing that it is that they're wanting in their lives.
So when you were um, going to your hypnotherapy sessions, like how, like I'm curious as to how long it took before you were actually like, okay, this is working. I'm starting to move those mental blocks. And then to the fact to when you were like, I want to do this for other people.
Yeah. You know, when I first booked a hypnotherapy session, there's something inside of me that's just, I'm not a naturally trusting person. I think a lot of women can relate to this, but I have this like internal, like, it's funny, like, and it's just a way that I kind of normalize this. And I'm like, I don't trust these hoes. There's just this part of me that's just like, no. And I was like, I am not gonna let somebody get in my head. So I didn't allow this hypnotherapist to actually, like, I didn't talk to her about any of my problems. So she just did a relaxation session with me. So I didn't talk to her. I didn't tell her what was actually happening for me in my life. I was just, relax me. And I had a profound experience that night in my dreams. And when I woke up the next morning, I was like, oh shit, this is what she was talking about. And so that created like, oh, maybe there's some maybe there's some truth to this kind of work. So then that's when I actually started working with her. So I say this to say, like, I was very skeptical. And then as soon as I had that experience, I was like, okay, I can do this now. And, it was like a slow burn. At first I was just, while you're in hypnotherapy, you're thinking the whole time, and your mind goes everywhere, and it's completely acceptable for that to happen. It's not like meditation. But I remember thinking, I remember thinking about in those sessions who in my life needed hypnotherapy. So I was like, Panchita, she needs hypnotherapy. Panchito, he needs hypnotherapy. And then I started to think about who of my friends would be good hypnotherapists. And then it all occurred to me finally, like, oh, this is for me. And so I started to feel, a real difference within myself pretty like instantly, to tell the truth. Like, I felt calmer, and then that just started opening paths for me. And I was in hypnotherapy school within 4 months. So it was a pretty quick turnaround that I felt empowered enough, and I had a vision of this is what I'm going to do. But I always thought I was going to do it just to have it. It was like something that would maybe in the future serve me. And I was right. It has served me in the future. But I also was at one point in my life working for corporate America, and I had an in-person practice. But now I do everything virtually.
Isn't it so interesting when we start healing ourselves? We're like, we want so and so to experience this, and we want our friends to experience this because it's just so freeing.
Yes.
And so
And they don't want to a lot of the
I
times.
know, I know. We just got to keep like
Yes.
telling them how amazing it is with therapy, and yeah, we have to recognize that everyone is on their own journey, and they will experience their healing when it's time for them to.
Mhm.
But I can definitely relate to experiencing that and saying like, oh, I think like that's when when I started therapy up again, I was like, okay, I'm going to tell everyone that they need to experience this because it is amazing. And yeah. um so, how has your journey from corporate America to studying hypnotherapy to having your practice to now going back and working in a nonprofit, how has that all connected to what you're doing now?
I mean, really, this is all accidental how I ended up at the nonprofit. And I was in a moment in my life, it was 2021, and I felt like I had some space to potentially like offer my time. And so I reached out to the then executive director of the nonprofit, and I just asked her, "Hey, do you need something? Is there a need within the nonprofit that I can help with?" And she said, "Well, actually, I'm going to be going out on maternity leave, and we offer these bi-weekly calls for teenagers, where you would essentially be holding space for them, facilitating them through their like tough times in life." And I was an immediate yes, even though, I'm a child-free woman. And I was kind of like, I don't know how to talk to teenagers. And I was like, well, I just got to talk to them the way that I wanted to be talked to as a teenager. Because I was really nervous. Like, I was like, teenagers? And also, teenagers are like, whoa. I was thinking about myself as a teenager too. So that's how I started at the nonprofit, was just volunteering my time, doing something that was needed at that moment. And a couple months later, a new executive director stepped in who happened to be a good friend of mine. And she and I, um, in our own worlds together, had put on an art show about 10 years ago. No, more than that. Oh my gosh. I think it's been like 15, 20. 15 years ago, but we put on an art show where a portion of the proceeds went to a nonprofit called A New Way of Life, which is a nonprofit in Los Angeles that um, allows women who have been formerly incarcerated to easily integrate back into their communities. So, we were little do-gooders. We had a mission. I think social justice was like on our hearts at the time, but it wasn't in it wasn't talked about the way that it is now. And so she was like, why don't you come on board here officially and you can be the associate director? Like, let's be partners in this. And so we went for it. And in that time, the nonprofit, which was originally founded to offer scholarships to people who normally could not attend these weekend workshops in healing, because as we know, like it's like, these things do cost money. And so these particular workshops within a community that we were a part of did cost about $1,500, and a lot of people didn't have money for that. And I started, I was the one that was rating our scholarships. And what I realized is that there were no brown people, black people, BIPOC folks that were signing up for the workshops. And so all the scholarships money was going to, yes, people who financially needed it, but it wasn't a marginalized group of people. It wasn't what I thought the foundation had set out to do. And I started kind of raising my voice about that. And then another moment came where there were changes coming to the organization. And I was asked to step in as the executive director, at least if I was interested, and I was not interested at all. And then I spoke to one of the women that I work with. When you have friends who are coaches, there's a lot of froaching that happens, like friends coaching each other. So she started froaching me, and she was like, what would it take, or what would you want the foundation to look like for you to stay here and to step into this role? And I said, well, I would want to have workshops that are for women of color, for BIPOC people, BIPOC women, for women like me. And that is when we really stepped into something very new, and we stopped doing teamwork, and we strictly started focusing on um, fundraising to have scholarships available so that BIPOC women could attend these weekend workshops, and that these workshops were only for women who identify outside of being white. So essentially, anyone that's not white, that doesn't call themselves white, can attend. And it's a and that so that is how I ended up at this moment, which again, it was all very accidental. I just wanted to be of service, and I didn't expect to be right here at this moment where we are with the organization. But I'm really, it's bumpy, but I'm at this moment in time, like I'm really happy and quite fulfilled being here.
I think it's not until we are like part of an organization that we start seeing the places where it wasn't like we thought it was. It wasn't like as sunshiny as we thought it was. So I've realized the struggle of nonprofits, that nonprofits face, especially those who are um, like trying to raise money, raise funds for the underrepresented groups. So, what challenges have you seen or come across as far as like funding and like you said, like you had to advocate for the specific needs that you wanted to see be met. But are there any other challenges that you've come across as far as funding, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. Multiple things come to mind. I mean, I think about one big challenge that we had last year, and it was the first time we were doing this workshop for, um, for women of color and diverse cultures. And I mean, I always knew that there was going to be a need to offer scholarships for women to attend, but I didn't realize how many. And so we ended up using way more of our donation dollars than we had tagged. And what that meant is that at the end of that workshop, while we did have an amazing workshop, we had 11 women show up. Of those 11 women, 10 of them required scholarships. And our workshop is not, we don't make money on the workshops, but we do have people to pay and vendors to pay. And we do our best to create a very nurturing, loving environment. Therefore, like our facilities are not cheap. We hire chefs because we want the women to receive like top notch facilitators and a top notch experience. So that put us in debt after that. And we also couldn't pay some of our team until later on, months later. And that was such a punch in the gut. It was such a like, what do I do? What do I do? Like, I was learning so many lessons at that moment in time around fundraising and around looking at grants. And I also froze a little bit. I had a lot of, I went through a big hormonal thing this past year. And so I didn't have all of the tools that I normally feel like I have or the capacity, but I kept trusting, I kept trusting. The team and we had to go on a little bit of a sabbatical for a bit. And I was in a moment where I was helping a friend out with something, and they said to me, "Hey, what can I give you? Can I give you some gas money? Can I?" Actually, he was asking my partner, like, because we were both helping him and his family out. And he said, "Can we give you gas money or something?" And my partner was like, "No, no, no, it's okay, it's okay." And then I finally spoke up and I said, what would be helpful is if you made a donation to the CCF." And it was like a practice. Like I was practicing with that ask because he was such a safe person to me. And he ended up turning around and doing a substantial donation, and then came back and said, "Hey, my wife and I actually have, $7,000 that we're willing to donate. What if you all do a match donation program, like I'm forgetting the role, a campaign?" And so that was such the like, right. So it's just like trusting myself in these moments and speaking from my heart when it's about the money piece, because this money piece is really, it is a challenge for us, and we're learning quite a bit. So that's been one of the challenges, and it's really about asking for help. Like that is one of the big challenges, like within myself. Like I noticed that the challenges that are happening at the CCF are the challenges that that I'm facing in my own life. So it's asking for help, it's speaking up when things don't feel right, um, it's being with like my own like wounding around belonging, still like it still exists, still getting out in the world and like talking about our nonprofit or what I do, especially if I'm in a group of like women of color. It's just like, ugh, it's like I'm still in that like, oh, are they like, what, she's not even Latina or whatever it might be. So there's still these pieces that like I'm still grappling with within myself that are the challenges, like slowing down, learning to slow down, having this idea that like there is no rush, that this foundation is going exactly where she needs to go. you know it's you know yeah, using my voice at the cost of upsetting people. That's a big one.
I appreciate everything you shared because I think that you're right. Like a lot of the blocks and a lot of the things that we struggle with as far as us thinking that it's external, like within our jobs, whether it's corporate America or personal life, like it is an internal thing that we need to be working through. And sometimes it just takes a little bit or an outside perspective to come in and say, like, perhaps it is because of something that you've been struggling with, because of like conditioned ideas about your worth or conditioned ideas about finances, that you are actually facing this block. And so I appreciate you mentioning that, because I think it takes a lot of self-awareness to be able to name that and say, like, oh, well, we're struggling with this in the nonprofit space, or we're struggling, like I'm struggling with this in my business, but it is because I haven't made the shift in my mind to be able to do the ask for help, or um, whatever it might be. So I really appreciate you sharing that piece of it. I think it's really valuable for us to be talking about things like this, and for us to make it more normalized to say, like, yeah, we have been conditioned to think that we shouldn't ask for help, that we need to be doing everything on our own, and asking for help is a weakness. And that could be like a cultural conditioned idea. It could be because we're women, but it is something that once we work towards it. And I love that you said that you are still working on things, even though you know that it is a mental block. Like you understand that you struggle with like your sense of belonging, and it is a constant practice and a journey to just because you name it doesn't mean that it's gonna magically go away. Like we need to constantly be working on ourselves, and it might like come up differently in different situations, but it doesn't mean that it's a failure or you're not doing good enough. It is just meaning that there's just more healing, more working through that needs to be done.
Right. And the awareness is what creates the ability to change the pattern and the awareness. So there is something, and how can we as, as humans slow down enough in our lives? And I get that it's hard, especially in this like capitalistic world that we're in, but it's like, how can we slow down, especially when we are creators, especially when we are trying to put something out in the world? Because when I've been able to slow down enough, I can actually be like, oh, right, asking for help feels really vulnerable. Because I remember so clearly, being 9 years old and coming back from Northern California and coming back to Los Angeles and seeing that like a predator that I had reported was like still walking around within the family system. And there's like something in me was just like, well, the adults don't know what they're doing. So I have to take care of myself. I need to like, I'm in charge of me. And there was something in that, like, if as long as I protect myself and I keep myself safe, that's all that matters. And that's like, that's not the way that we're meant to live in the world. We're meant to be in connection. So a lot of times when I'm asking for help, I need to remind myself, like when I'm like, no, no, I'm not going to ask for help. I'm like, that's like the little 9-year-old in you speaking. And you are a grown ass 46-year-old woman. You are a woman that knows how to ask for help. And it's just, it's having to, but we have to have the awareness first to kind of know where to have this understanding for ourselves. And then we can also have compassion for ourselves. And that is where the healing really comes in, when we can be compassionate with ourselves, not just with everybody else. An understanding of everybody else's pain and flaws and survival strategies, but like for ourselves. Like that's such a big part of the work. And then eventually it can ripple out into our families and having understanding with our families too.
Yes. Ah, so good. I want everyone to connect with you. I want people to follow you. And I'd love for you to share where people can support the nonprofit or stay in touch with you, or how can people stay connected?
Yeah, I mean, the best place, I'm pretty active on Instagram, and it's tabithanieto.cht. That's on Instagram. And we do have an Instagram for the nonprofit COR Community Foundation. If you just look it up, COR is COR. Now, we are going to be going through a rebranding, and we have something, a new vision that we're moving into in 2024. We're still going to connect. We're still going to have our workshops, but we're going to be changing our name, so the name will change at some point. But you can always find me, Tabitha Nieto, .cht. And we do have a workshop that's coming up, and it's in Central California. And we have a few spots available today, as of right now. And the workshop begins on November 7th. And so there may be some spots available by the time this podcast comes out. So if anybody wants to check out our website, corcommunityfoundation.org, you can learn about that too. But also just hit me up. Like I'm the good like in between for all of this.
Awesome. And then before I let you go, I'd love for you to share some advice or encouragement for the next generation.
Yeah, I mean, the word that's coming to mind is resilience. And with pop psychology that we see online, there's some folks that have some negative feelings about resilience. And what I want to encourage us all is what if we looked at resilience like our best friend? Like she's our best friend, they, our best friend that lives inside of us and is always there and ready to be with us to help us face the hard things in our life. And that this resilience, your best friend, is here to like propel you. And it's not to make you stronger or force you to do anything or make you suffer. Like your resilience is here to help you believe that you are bigger and you have the capacity to meet whatever hard moment you have in your life. And listen to that best friend, listen to that resilience when she says, call somebody, ask for help, show your heart, tell the truth, open your mouth. Listen to your best friend, listen to your resilience. It's here to help you in every and any possible way. Like resilience is a gift.
Oh man, that is so encouraging. Thank you so much. I am so glad that we happened to meet at this event and that we were able to chat. I'm so thankful for your time and all of the wisdom and your story that you shared. Thank you so much. I know that it's going to be relatable, and I just appreciate your authenticity. And I'm sure that we will see each other in person soon. I'm always up to go to LA.
I would love that.
Yes, and if you're ever in Chicago, come on.
Yeah.
Just not in the winter. Don't come in the winter.
Well, thank you for this space, the space that you're creating for so many people. It's so needed just to really allow all these various voices to be heard. So thank you for what you're doing too.
Yeah, thank you. All right, well, we will chat soon.
Okay, sounds good.
Bye.
Bye.
I'm so glad to have connected with Tabitha during my trip to LA for the Amigas in Business Summit. If you haven't connected with the We All Grow community, you definitely should look into that today. The link will be in the show notes. Okay, amigos, thank you so much for listening. There will be a new episode every Tuesday, so after you listen, feel free to take a screenshot to post on Instagram and tag @ElevatingLaCultura. or send me a DM. You can also comment on our YouTube video if you're watching online. I always like to hear from people and how they resonate with the stories that I share. So leave a review on Apple Podcasts so we can get more ears listening to these stories and we can continue elevating la cultura. All right, enjoy the rest of your day, afternoon, evening, whenever you're listening, y nos vemos next week. Bye.